Welcome to edition number 4 of the Three Amigos. We are Richard Dillman, Peter Frohwein, and me, Regis Tremblay. Now, the topic for tonight is the drum beats for war are beating loudly all over the EU and even in the United States. War against whom? Well, tonight we're going to only focus on the war against Russia. The United States looks like it's planning to fight a war on 4 fronts: Russia, China, Iran, and now Venezuela. But tonight, our focus is going to be on statements and events that have happened in the last week or so, that recent, that indicate that the EU, the leaders in the EU, are threatening and provoking and talking about even false flags to get Russia to react so that the United States can be drawn into this war, because the Europeans know they cannot win it without the United States. And therefore, all the talk about false flags. So tonight, we're going to look at a number of those recent statements and events that indicate that the Europeans and even the Americans are beating the drums of war. To start off, I'm going to go to Peter. Peter Frohwein, can you give me one example of how the Europeans or the Americans are beating the drums of war?
Sure. I guess about a week and 10 days ago, there were some drones that were a number of drones. I think it was between 10 and 20 drones that were flown into Poland. Right away, Poland claimed that these were drones that were launched by Russia. But then the closer look at these drones, they said, well, these were decoy drones. They had no explosives on them at all. And these drones, it made no sense because these drones, they have a limited flight distance, and there's no way that these drones could have come from Russia. But right away, Poland started saying, "Hey, these are Russian drones. This is a an attack by Russia to escalate the conflict." And the Russian government said, "Hey, we don't know anything about these drones. Let's talk about this. Let's look at the actual what's going on." And so far, Poland has refused to do that. But it makes no sense because Russia's winning this war in Ukraine. It doesn't need to have any provocations with Poland or anyone else. Well, these were decoy drones. They were drones that, and from what I can tell, the most likely scenario, what had happened is these are drones that Russia used on Ukraine, and they fell into Ukraine at some point, and then Ukraine took these drones, repurposed them. They were even some of these drones are duct taped up and repurposed and sent into Poland from Ukraine, and with the intent of a false flag to say that Russia launched these drones, which I believe is complete nonsense.
Yeah, and the Donald Tusk, the Polish prime minister, said, and I quote, "The Ukraine conflict is the biggest threat of the century, putting the future of Western civilization at risk," close quote. The Poles are certainly not wanting to cooperate, Peter, as you said, with Russia to investigate. Of course, the Ukraine is not going to do that. So another false flag, an attempt to get Russia to react, and of course they didn't. Richard, do you have another one?
Yeah, the Ukraine continues to fire missiles and drones deep into Russia, and most probably enabled doing this by U.S. and NATO technology. But basically, you know, they can do that. They could send those drones deep into Russia and stuff. Yeah, it's a bad thing. It's not good for Russia. But these are more revenge type weapons. Just and all they're going to get is a counter revenge, and Russia has proved that time and time again. Last week, right after the meeting we had, we were talking. I told you, I said, watch after those drones they hit that day, the night before. You watch a massive strike on Kyiv. Not that I know everything, but because they've been doing that. Russia's been quiet about this. They've been quiet about it ever since the beginning of the year. But if they want to send these things deep into Russia, Russia will just go there, pound. People will not have any energy. They won't be able to heat their houses. It's going to be a long, long winter for Ukraine.
Yeah, and
if they do that.
And Richard, just to add to that, just in the last 2 days, 3 days, General Keith Kellogg is one of Trump's ambassadors, peacemakers. He said that we are giving the green light to Ukraine to use those long missiles to strike deep into Russia. And J.D. Vance himself said the U.S. is considering sending Tomahawk missiles to Ukraine. There couldn't be anything clearer that these are extreme and serious threats. I would just like to add that the former head of NATO, Jens Stoltenberg, he said this, and I'm going to quote. Let me find it here. He said something to effect that. No, it wasn't Stoltenberg. It was the former defense minister of the UK. And what he said was, we need to basically annihilate Ukraine. Crimea. We need to hit them so hard that they can't survive. They'll have nothing to eat, and we need to hit the Kerch Bridge. Now, this is the former Prime Minister of the UK. I don't know what you guys think, but I think that the UK is basically the dog wagging the tail. Peter, what do you think? Do you think it's the UK that's behind all of this?
Oh, I think for sure. I think they're one of the main instigators of this attempt to have false flags. And from what I can tell, from what things Trump has said, it sounds like he wants to extricate the U.S. out of any involvement in this. And I think a false flag, the purpose of a false flag would be to drag U.S. back into the situation, which I think Trump really doesn't want. And I think one of the most concerning things that I've seen is just in the last week or so, there at the UN General Assembly, there were a number of UK countries that their representatives got up and basically kept repeating the same line, like they were all given the same script. They said this, it's the same line they've been using from the beginning of this, but it's just not true. This saying this unprovoked attacks on Ukraine, which this was not unprovoked, and then they're saying illegal, and which I believe, according to the United Nations charter, Russia had every right to start this special operation and go in and protect these people in the Donbass. So it seems to me, from what I can see, that there is a script that all of these NATO members are reading from and just say, okay, just keep repeating these things. And, and it's for me, it looks like a drumbeat of war.
Richard, what are your thoughts? Do you want to comment on that or do you want to move on?
No, well, yeah, as far as the drumbeat of war, it's all over the news constantly. It's making it. They're trying to make it seem like it's a normal thing that and France is saying told the hospitals to be able to be prepared for wounded and stuff like that. Germany's also told their people be prepared for war. It's a situation there, and it's almost even a little bit in the Russian news. It just seems to be almost the same thing as, yeah, looks like we're going to have to fight Europe. That's what you get that type of headlines, and maybe Yedved lately was talking about stuff like that, if I recall. But it seems like both sides are getting trying to set the narrative that, yeah, we're we'll be ready in 2027. They're saying, and all this, but it just seems to be like they're trying to get the narrative all around NATO and even over in here that it's just pretty much a done deal, and there will be war. No peace. Nobody's talking about any peace deals or anybody coming to the table or any logical solutions to the end of this. They're just seem to be going the other way and say, yeah, looks like we're going to have to fight it out.
Yeah,
That's what I see. I don't see. I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but that's what it looks like to me.
well, we got to, Richard, we got to be objective. We have to try to be objective. And you mentioned Dmitry Medvedev. He's been
Yeah,
making really strong statements, warnings to the West. Uh, I'm
a
sure.
couple of years.
What's that?
For a couple of years now, he has.
But most recently, he's been
Yeah,
all
really. Yeah,
almost every
definitely.
day. He's speaking out on his Telegram channel, which I subscribe to. Uh, and I look at it like this: Putin is the left channel, Medvedev is the right hand channel. They're speaking stereophonically. Putin, ever the diplomat, quiet, smooth, never ruffled. Medvedev, uh, he shows his emotions. He doesn't hold back at all. He's like your junkyard dog. And I think when we look at Russian responses to these things, you have to listen to both channels. You made a really good point there. I want to come back to what's happening in the United States again. Um, Vance, he's made a number of statements. He's even acting like he thinks he might become president before Trump finishes this term. He's got this strut about him. He's all over the news, and he's really speaking on many occasions like he's the president. Anyway, this is what Vance said, and I want you guys to react to this. He called on the Russians to quote unquote to wake up. I asked myself the question, wake up to what? Peter, what could that possibly mean? Wake up to Russia. He's the vice president of the United States.
Well, Vance and the top leadership around Trump are completely, I think, delusional to really what's going on. So I think it's ironic that he's asking Russia to wake up when, from what I can see, they don't, from what I'm hearing from Trump and Vance and those around him, around Trump, is they don't understand what's going on in Ukraine at all. They keep saying nonsense like Russia has mass casualties, and from what I can tell, the real numbers is Russia's had maybe around 250,000 casualties, where the Ukrainian casualties are off the charts. I'd say the real numbers are 1.7 to 1.8 million. So It's not even close. And then they keep Vance and Trump keep repeating this lie about the Russian economy. It's my contention. I've studied the Russian economy very closely for at least the last 5 years now. From what I can tell, Russia has, if not the strongest, one of the strongest economies in the world today. I mean, its debt to GDP is between 15 and 20%, which by standards of other major countries is extremely low. And seeing how many people came to the beach this summer, it was a record number of tourists and other economic data that, I mean, sure is Russia's had to adjust its economy somewhat to this war for sure, but Russia has not gone to a wartime footing, nothing even close to that. There's no shortages of anything. I know there's been some reports of gas lines in some parts of Russia. I think in the far east, maybe in Vladivostok, and maybe in some parts of Crimea here. But I haven't seen any gas lines here in Crimea. I mean, at all. So there are some reports of gas lines. I haven't seen any. So this idea of waking up, I'm just completely puzzled. Like I said, as far as I can see, Russia's fully awake. It's Trump, Vance, and those who are advising Trump around him who are giving him information. Either they know it's a lie, or the U.S. Intelligence agency is giving Trump and Vance bad information intentionally.
Yeah. And, the three of us have commented on this a number of times when we do our regular meetings at the local pizzeria, that we go to the market and the markets are full of local fresh vegetables, fruit, meat, milk, eggs, whatever you need. And I don't shop very often in the grocery stores, but I was just there recently and the shelves are packed. There's not an empty spot anywhere. There's people working, always replenishing so that they're all full. So this is really a very egregious lie coming out of the mouths of Trump and Hegseth and J.D. Vance. Peter, I'm sorry, Richard, do you want to comment on that? Be brief.
About Hegseth telling the Russians to wake up.
No, that was Vance. That was Vance.
Oh, Vance said the Russians to wake up. Yeah, well, that what people in the United States should wake up to who Vance is and his affiliate to the Heritage Foundation. Okay, and really get in some enlightenment there now. Who is the Heritage Foundation? I won't get into it real deep, but I would. That's what I would say. But as far as listen. I was talking to a guy. I know a guy that works at a gas station. I was talking to him the other day, and I asked him about this thing with he told me he did see lines, but more like in September and the end of August, and he said it was more to the volume of the tourists here. They were running out of gas because it was just such a huge tourist influx this summer, and it really started hitting home with the gas. Maybe the war had something to do with it, but he told me here he thinks it was more from the tourism, because there's nothing now. There's no problem now with gas, and that's only been a couple of weeks ago with the gas thing, the lines of gas.
So, but, Richard,
just on the ground. That's what a person told me that. Yeah,
Richard, I want to point out and to clarify what you're saying. All of these tourists are coming here by their own automobiles. That's why there was such a drain on petrol. And as Peter pointed out, we set an all-time record here in Yalta, but all of Crimea set this enormous record. Now, granted, some people come by train, but the majority are coming by automobiles. And the three of us can testify what kind of traffic jams, snarls of traffic happened
Yeah.
all over Yalta. I
Oh
mean,
yeah.
what ordinarily took
It was all,
maybe 15 minutes to get somewhere would now could take you an hour. So,
yeah,
so
for sure.
yeah, and now I want to comment on Trump. Uh, Everybody knows that Trump went over and met King Charles and Keir Starmer, the uh, Prime Minister of Great Britain. And
Mhm.
you can argue about what the symbolism of that was, but what we know came out of that is when he came back, he started saying things like this: Ukraine can win and take back all the territory. This is a 180-degree shift from just a couple of weeks before that. He said Ukraine can't win and they got to get ready to give up territory. And then in the same breath, he said Russia is a paper tiger. And he questioned about the Russian economy and the Russian military. Paper tiger being weak. Russia had no teeth. I found this incredible. So, Peter, your thoughts on that statement and the reversal I felt was so significant that now not only did the rhetoric change, but in terms of beating the drums of war, I think this is obviously something in Trump's mind that changed and thinks now if Russia is really a paper tiger and their economy is going to hell, he's feeling emboldened. What are your thoughts?
Well, again, this is just, I don't know how Trump is so disconnected from the reality of the situation. I mean, when the special operation started, I believe the intent of Russia was to get Ukraine to come to the peace table and sign a peace agreement, which they had them at the peace table, and both sides were ready to sign this agreement. And then it's common knowledge now that what was the prime
Boris
minister from
Boris
yeah,
Johnson.
yeah, Boris Johnson flew in and said no, don't do this deal. So and that was within a month of when the special operation started. And then there's this repeating of Russia, could have gone into Kiev then. Well, they were very close to Kiev before that. But their intent bring them to the peace table. It was not to start, to go full on, and it was not a full on invasion. Well, I think after that peace deal fell apart, they really said, okay, what is the intent of the West? And so at that point, they said, okay, we need to change our strategy, and this looks like it's going to be a long drawn out war. And from what I can tell, so I think initially were not completely prepared, but they very quickly transitioned into okay, we need to take this seriously. We need to ramp up and start to beef up. Now, it's not to say that the Russian army and military was not already fairly strong. It's just they okay, we need to change our strategy, and then the recruitment started, and volunteers started. It just was I don't know what the actual numbers were, but between 50,000 and 100,000 Russian men and women were joining the military per month. And so I think that's continued up to this time. To say that Russia's a paper tiger is just it's complete nonsense from what I can see. That in fact I worked in the U.S. military industrial complex for 7 years, so I have some knowledge of the weapon systems that the U.S. had and has. And I would say that the Russian weapon systems today are more advanced by at least 10 or 15 years. And Trump keeps making the statement that the U.S. has the strongest military in the world, which I find I don't believe that's the case at all. In fact, I think this meeting that Pete Hegseth just called of all these generals up in Quantico. He called it was yesterday or day before where he had every general from all U.S. general from all over the world at a meeting, and they're repeating this, that the U.S. has the strong, but in the same breath, he's basically said we've got a lot of problems inside the U.S. military. So it's this, okay, either we're the strongest in the world or we've got a lot of problems. Which one is it? And I believe from what I could see that the U.S. military is in shambles. And I don't know what's led it to this point, how many years it's taken it to get to this point, but I'd say it's nowhere near. Yeah, I believe today, if the U.S. military tried to take on the Russian military, it wouldn't be even close. The Russian military would, and even if the combined forces of the U.S. and NATO came against Russia, there's no way that the U.S. and NATO could win this. So it's just this nonsense. They're just so disconnected from the real world that it's very concerning to me because their overestimation of their own power is just it's stunning.
Yeah, that was shocking. We'll get back to that in just a little bit. Richard, you want to comment on that? Russia is a
Sure,
paper tiger.
absolutely, absolutely. Okay, Trump went to England, and he got his. The way it seems like you were saying, how he was trying to get Russia to the peace table. He realized that Ukraine was losing, so he goes to England. And what happened? So it seems to me like he went to the city of London, and the lizards gave him his marching orders. Okay, uh, but these things here, when he's over here talking about, oh, Russia's a paper tiger and all this stuff, it's just come
Wait a
on,
minute, wait a minute, wait a minute.
it,
Before you go, wait a second. Before you go any further, who the hell are the lizards? What are you talking about?
well, who the hell do you think well, if you ever looked at the architecture and the statues in the city of London, that's all I say. Okay, just check them out sometime. You'll see what I'm talking about. They
Well,
like the lizards. They like the lizards there. Okay.
all right,
Um,
go ahead, go ahead.
before I forget, I'm old here. I have tendency to forget, but you know, the thing here when he's over there, all of a sudden he's changing it over and saying they're they're just what do you call them, a paper tiger? Is that what
Yeah,
it is? Okay, this is the president of the United States saying that, and what is that doing? It's feeding into the narrative that yeah, we might as well go to war with them. I mean, we can do this. You know what I mean? Or and then the other thing is to beef it up, and he goes and they were just talking about we have the strongest military in the world, and then Trump was also one other couple of weeks, maybe just a week ago, he was talking somewhere where he was saying we have such amazing weapons, you can't even believe the weapons that we have, and coming up with this situation of narrative of yes, we should go to war, and this has been being pushed, and it's been being pushed well over, I'd say, a year, where the EU, especially the neocons in the EU, are pushing this thing where we will not accept a loss in Ukraine under any circumstance. Maybe even 2 years. It's been a little while now, and they're hammering that home. You got to listen to their buzzwords, and after a while, their buzzwords. They've done that in the United States. They traumatize the population of the United States through the MK mind control stuff forever, and whatever they're pushing, and they keep using the buzzwords
Yeah. Now,
and that's
now
what I think is going on. That's what I
Yes,
think is going on.
I
Peter.
need to ask the question: why is the West pushing for war? Why are these false flags? Why do they feel this need to? And I think maybe in the previous program we discussed this a little bit, but I think it's very important to understand why they need war. Is right now the economies in the West are a total shambles. Um, Germany, has I think asked the IMF for loans. England's very close to asking the IMF for loans. Um, um, France is in deep trouble. The U.S. is the best of the lot, but still the U.S. economy is in deep trouble. But definitely the economies in Europe are about to fail, and it's my belief that this has happened many times in history is when countries get close to economic failure, they start wars as a distraction. And I believe that's exactly what's going on here is these major countries in Europe, their economies are very close to failing. And so if they start the war, they can say, look, it wasn't us who destroyed the economy, it was Russia. Russia, keep repeating this Russia lie so they can blame. So when the war starts, to go, see, we didn't crash our own economies. It was Russia that did it. So Russia forced us to go into war. But from a standpoint of, and I'll make this quick, is Russia, the EU in UK, or not UK, but Europe has nothing Russia wants or needs. It makes no sense that Russia would want to have any war with Europe. It makes zero sense.
Yeah. And in addition to, another part of the answer, why do they want war? Analysts who are much smarter than we are, who are much more experienced than we are in warfare and diplomacy, many analysts are saying it's because these paper tigers who are unelected officials in Brussels, okay, who are calling for war because they are the ones who have driven most of Europe into catastrophic everything, economy, cultures, racial divisions, immigration. You just keep on and naming it. But to stay in power and to not lose their very healthy stipends, they're beating the drums to war. Ursula von der Leyen, I don't know whether
Wow.
she's a lizard, Richard, but she's definitely a witch on a broom. This is what she
She's
said.
She's an order taker.
Well, yeah, we know they're all order takers. She says we have to ramp up the military, and we have to ramp up the provocations against Russia in order to force the EU vassals into a military point of no return. Can you believe this language coming out of the mouths of these people? I mean, if either one of us were in her position, we wouldn't utter anything so crazy and insane as that woman. You talk about being totally unhinged. All right, I want to move on. A couple of other things, guys. You all remember Chernobyl. You've heard about it for sure. Well, the nuclear power plant at Zaporozhye, which is under the complete control and management of the Russian Federation, that has had for since the beginning of the war, almost 3 years, IAEA, International Atomic Energy Association, with their top people, including the head of it, this Grassi guy, have been on site. And Ukraine has been shelling it constantly.
Yeah.
And their response has been, well, it's being shelled, but we can't tell where the missiles are coming from. Guys, a 12-year-old Boy Scout with a compass could figure that out in 5 minutes. Now, just this week, Ukraine again struck at the power plant. What they knocked out was the electrical feed coming from Ukraine that's been keeping their water cooling process to cool down the uranium, has been keeping that under control. They knocked it out. as a result, Russia has had to provide electricity via several large diesel generators. Now, it's well known Russia's got lots of diesel fuel. So I don't think there's any chance of a meltdown, but some experts are saying that it could happen. Okay, because not enough cooling or not enough electricity. Now, Zelensky is saying it's the Russians that are doing this. And the question is, why on earth would Russia want to blow up their own or the nuclear power plant that they're in possession of? It makes no sense at all. But another serious provocation, which could result in a mushroom cloud that almost all of Europe, depending on how the wind blows, would die from radioactive material. Richard, your thoughts on what the heck is going on in Zaporozhye with that nuclear power plant?
Well, I forget the guys. Is it Bodinov or the SBU head of the Ukrainian? What are they, like the stormtroopers or whatever? He had said not long ago that if they did take a loss, if they were losing, that they would start taking their own nuclear power plants out. It's just sheer insanity. Some of the stuff coming from out of there. I remember that. That was just outrageous what he was saying. So I don't put nothing past them. I don't put anything past them at all. These people are evil. I mean, man, yeah. I mean, maybe I'd like to ask, with the Zaporozhye power plant, is that feeding the Dnipro area, Dnipropetrovsk, that big city?
I'm not sure.
Words,
I'm not sure what
it
feeds,
the electricity,
but
the electricity coming out of that big. It's a huge plant, it's a big one. Huh?
Oh yeah,
but
I don't think it. I don't think it's currently online.
They're not getting on. Yeah, okay.
I don't think it's online.
Oh, all right. Okay, I wasn't sure if they were just.
But they still have to cool down
right
that radio.
Yeah, right. Okay, all right.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure of that.
Yeah,
I wasn't sure of that.
Peter, what are your thoughts on what the hell is going on?
Well, again, I think the Ukrainian government is getting desperate. Now, I think it's a bad sign that the head of the IEA pretends he doesn't know who's attacking this is just, like you said, it's nonsense. A 12-year-old Boy Scout could figure this out. The Russians have control of the plant. They're not going to be attacking their own plant that they control. So the Ukrainians are getting desperate because they know they're losing. They're losing badly on every front, and I think because they're losing badly, they're going to escalate or try to do things like this that will cause mass casualties, whether it's their own people or whether it's going to be Russian casualties or both. And they don't care about, from what I can tell, they don't care about human life at all, or the consequences of a nuclear meltdown of the biggest nuclear plant in Europe. So it's very concerning.
Yeah, no kidding. I don't care where you live, depending on where the wind blows. It's going to have a devastating effect on human life and health. There's no doubt about it. I want to change the subject. Both of you are aware that the EU has been holding Russian assets in Europe. And the United States is doing the same thing with Russian assets, and it's billions and billions of dollars. I think something like $300 billion in assets. Russia has complained from the beginning. It's totally illegal. It's against all international agreements. And the EU has been arguing throughout this war, and now lately it's been really intense. Should we use it or not? I just read today, guys, that the EU transferred 4 billion euros, in other words, 4.7 billion US dollars from frozen Russian assets to Ukraine, with another 2 billion earmarked for UAV production, unmanned aerial vehicles. Peter, I'm going to start with you on this one again. What are your thoughts on that? What kind of a message does that send to Russia? Is it another layer of a declaration of war? Stealing, as Russia said, Putin, his spokesperson, Maria Zakharova, it's stealing on an international level. Your thoughts?
Well, there are some in Europe who understand the consequences of this, but I think the majority of them, the leaders, really don't. Is by confiscating illegally these Russian assets, this was equivalent to an economic atomic bomb. And what I mean by that is other countries saw this and said, hey, we can't trust these people anymore. And when you destroy the trust in an economic system, monetary system, then you're going down a path that can't be reversed for quite a while. So other countries saw this and are taking steps to protect their own assets. They're slowly getting their money out of the euro, which the euro was already in trouble. So this is, but to your point, from what I understand, it's 50 to 100 billion in the U.S., and then the rest is in euro clear in Europe. And I've even heard numbers as high as they're talking about taking 10 billion a month and giving it to Ukraine. It's just like you said, it's stolen money. It's completely illegal. The legal people in Europe who understand the law are saying, do not do this. This is a bad idea, and saying just what I've said, that you're destroying the confidence in the euro and in our monetary system in Europe. And so, but there are countries like China and others that are taking steps to slowly move their money away from the euro because they don't trust the EU anymore. Yeah. So they're just shooting themselves in the foot. And it's Russia won't let this go unanswered. They won't.
Yeah, Richard, what do you think?
Well, like Peter said, I think it's just they're just taking the integrity of the monetary system and just blowing it up. It's Orwellian. It's Orwellian. This whole thing, it's Orwellian. You would never even imagine them even considering doing something like this. Use assets like that. And but I think basically too, though, I did hear that France was thinking about turning some of that into that stolen assets of Russian into bonds. Their excuse would be, oh well, we turn them into bonds. They're actually stealing the money. The French want to steal it. I forget how much. It was a lot though, and so it's a situation here where it's a monetary system change, between the BRICS and the other system, and they don't want to. They're not going to settle for that. That's the big thing in the background.
Yeah, and
the BRICS.
As Peter indicated, Russia will respond, and Russia has promised to respond in kind. There are billions of dollars, of euros or whatever, investments from the West in Russia. And Putin and his spokesperson and Medvedev have said, we will respond in kind.
Yeah.
So there you go. I want to finish on this note. We have maybe about 10 minutes left, and I want to be really quick on this because this deserves an entire show. I want your comments very quickly, okay, on what happened yesterday in Quantico, Virginia, the Marine headquarters. The Secretary of War, Hegeseth, rambled on for 45 minutes lecturing some 400, has been estimated, senior command, force commanders from all over the world. And then that was followed up by Trump, who was just supposed to make a few short comments. He went on for 1 hour and 11 minutes. I'd like your comments briefly on what this entire show signified. Richard, starting with you.
Outright arrogance by the administration. They could have done all that with a Zoom call. You know, the American people are hurting. The American people are hurting. I was just back in the United States, and I was living with my niece, and even they were having all sorts of signs on the streets in their yards. You know, I have to pay $1,700 more per year for their taxes and stuff like that, and the electric rates and all this other stuff that they're sitting around doing zip pointing nothing about the inflation that the poor people have been under since the last 4 or 5 years since COVID. They're still reeling from COVID, and these people go to take and truck all these guys and fly all these hot shots, all the brass. Screw them. Who the hell do they think they are? They could have done this, like I said, with a Zoom call. Who the hell do they think they are?
Yeah,
and you know what? I mean, you know, this is pathetic. It's disgusting that they could just go waste that type of money.
Richard, in addition to what it costs to fly them there and put them up, imagine the money they had to spend just on security. These guys don't travel without security, and the layers and layers of security that must have been needed. Jesus, when you think about it, what a target. If Russia was that much of a menace, Russia could have sent an Oreshnik or one of their missiles that can't be tracked to Quantico. You would have wiped out the president and his aides, Hegseth and his aides, the top 400 commanders in the military, plus support staff. Can you imagine the insanity of taking that risk? That's what I thought. I just thought it was an enormous risk.
Absolutely.
Peter, your thoughts?
Security crazy.
Your thoughts, Peter?
Well, they're telling us what they're going to do right in our face. Most people aren't paying attention. When you change the name of the Department of Defense back to the Department of War. Now, most people don't know this. During World War II and before that, it was called the Department of War. And then after World War II, at some point, they changed it to the Department of Defense. Well, at least they're being honest about their intentions now. It's like, okay, it's the Department of War. And then even in that meeting, Hegseth said, we're preparing for war. And again, my question is, with who? Who are you preparing to go to war with? Because Russia does not want to go to war with the United States or NATO or any other country. So they're in your face. Most people aren't paying attention to. They're telling us what they want to do. Now this whole idea, they keep saying, no, we want to get out of Ukraine and we want peace. Well, I think all that's nonsense. Trump keeps saying he's the president of peace, and said he would end the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. That didn't happen. And look at the Middle East. That war didn't end. And I think we'll see, that flare up again. So from that meeting, I took away, hey guys, we're preparing for war. Let's start preparing now. So they're telling us what they want to do. Now, my question is, are the American people just going to sit idly by and watch this happen? Or are they going to say, no, we don't, this is nonsense. This is suicide. Because if there's a direct war with the U.S. and NATO, with Russia, it will end in nuclear war. Period.
And that's the fear. And to add to what you were both saying, it's like both Hegseth and Trump were beating their chests. We are the strongest, the most powerful, the most lethal military in the entire world. And yet, what we've been talking about before, they're terribly unprepared in terms of production. Peter, as you were talking about, lagging way behind Russia and China, by the way. And so when you hear them both talk in these angry, these belligerent phrases and language, you have to sit back and say, these people are absolutely crazy. They are preparing for war. And as I like to say, the Army has a slogan. It's Latin, and it goes, Si vis pacem, para bellum. What that means is, if you want peace, prepare for war. That's what these bullshitters said yesterday, both of them. We are peacemakers. And the way to get to peace is to prepare for war so that nobody will ever dare touch us. Now, I don't buy that. If you want peace, prepare for war. I say what they're doing is si vis bellum, para bellum. If you want war, which they obviously do across the pond and all through the administration, they're preparing for war and they're going to get it. And Peter, all three of us, I know, agree. We've talked about it amongst ourselves. If this does go to war, there's no stopping going nuclear. And then that's the end of the human experience. Guys, thanks a lot. Fun, great show. We're going to do it again real quick.